If there's one thing I'm good at, it's marketing and digital strategy. I started in the trenches running my own campaigns, running my own brands, and today I'm CEO of Alley Group, which is an award-winning global agency. I've led 100 plus people now, worked on top brands like HexClad, like Tinder, like Yeti, and have now driven over $6 billion in revenue across over 100 plus countries. And what I'm hoping to focus on is sharing the frameworks and thought processes that help me scale brands and build what I've seen as one of the most successful performance first agencies. Today, I'm going to break down the 3 biggest fatal flaws that I see most brands making so that you can avoid these pitfalls for yourself and make yourself scale and get over to that $1 million hump that most brands are after. Starting with fatal flaw number 1, you're channel hopping. So when I look at so many brands and why they plateau for $1 million, it's rarely one single issue. And really, inside most companies, there's always going to be a scapegoat, right? So you'll have the sales team blaming the marketing team, the product team blaming the marketing team, and then you'll have your marketing team blaming their agency. And the cycle will continue over and over. And while this dynamic is rather frustrating, it's also something that me as an external partner can't necessarily fix for you. But in my experience, brands don't stall because of this one department or one isolated mistake. They stall because their entire growth system is built on what I see as incorrect assumptions. And 3 of the biggest assumptions I've seen over and over are the following. They assume all platforms are created equal. And that being on more platforms automatically would then create more scale, which isn't true. They also assume that creative is more of an accessory instead of really the engine that could drive your performance. And when it comes to measurement and KPIs, they will assume that their KPIs that they track really drive and help drive business incomes, but in most cases they do not. So these assumptions may seem rather small, but they can influence a brand's direction far more than most teams realize. And they're a major reason why they hit this growth plateau long before it should. So when a strategy or creative is forced into an environment where it doesn't belong, what happens is that the signals will get diluted, algorithms will get confused, and teams end up thinking that they would have a performance problem when in reality they have more of a misalignment problem. As a bit of a general cheat sheet of the top platforms, again, every platform people will behave differently on. So let's look at Meta. They could see themselves and their lifestyle. On TikTok, they'll want raw and unpolished content. On YouTube, they come and learn and watch deeper explanations. On Google, they're kind of searching with intent. They kind of already know what they want and they're kind of then comparing options. On LinkedIn, they care more about expertise and proof. And programmatic is more, or display in many ways, it's more of a scaling tool and it works best when something's already proven and ready to convert. So again, these are fairly directional, but I've seen them work in practice over and over again in both a B2C and B2B based environment. In fact, for one of our clients that came to us, so unfortunately they had an issue where they started running on TikTok and performance for their campaigns dramatically decreased within a number of months. So they looked to us to see how and where we could help. As we dug into the performance, what we found is that they were initially working within Google and LinkedIn, but due to the fact that they saw some success or they saw a competitor find some success on TikTok, they decided to jump all in. Unfortunately for them, they essentially created and recreated their LinkedIn content and ad sets and brought them into TikTok. And unfortunately, as I just mentioned, the behavior on TikTok is very different from that of LinkedIn. So what happened is that they initially saw a large uptick in overarching traffic, which again looks somewhat of a vanity-based growth and success due to the fact that there was more traffic coming to site. But when we start looking at the margin base and back end numbers, we saw that overall cost per lead increased almost by 75%, and that the leads that were coming through actually were much more of poor quality. So we took on the campaign, and different from what many people would believe, we actually didn't stop running TikTok. What we did was pulled back budget, used TikTok as more of a community layer, and introduced actually YouTube, where we knew more educational content would work best. Within a matter of months, what actually happened was their cost per lead normalized and actually improved by about 35%. The quality of leads increased by about 45%, or at least according to their sales team. And overall, by looking at the right channel and the right strategy within each channel, we were able to overperform and show a lot more success for the client. So what we constantly see is that successful brands aren't not necessarily chasing channels, but what they're doing is working through them and being strategic in how they orchestrate these different channels. One way to kind of look at it is that in terms of a conversion engine, most brands will often start with search and meta, and then they will layer different channels based on the context and the behavior that you're working within. So think of awareness through YouTube, credibility through LinkedIn, community through TikTok, and scale through a lot of different programmatic channels. Programmatic is, in general can mean a lot of things, as it can encapsulate display, it can encapsulate video, connected television, digital out of home. So normally in these instances, for a lot of brands, especially in terms of budget, you're going to be focusing around more of the display or even native components of programmatic. This brings us to the fatal flaw number 2. You're treating creative as an afterthought. And what I mean by that is the world in which we live in, especially the world of paid media, evolves very, very quickly. So a lot of the types of assumptions and flaws that I see have also evolved, and creative to me has been one of the biggest ones. So a thing to keep in mind with a lot of this stuff is that we're running campaigns via algorithms, and the algorithms themselves are getting smarter and smarter each day. And what I mean by that is why that impacts us is that us as traders are now leaning really heavily on the algorithms, and the algorithms themselves are kind of carrying more of the load. And what that means for you as a brand is that creative is going to become much more impactful. So when you think about an algorithm, you have to understand how scary smart they're getting. So I've listened to different books, and it's almost like they're running somewhat of a psyop, right? So even when you think about Meta or Instagram, for instance, what you'll find is that more often than not, you'll be served ads that piss you off. You'll have 1, 2, or 3, 4 ads, and then you'll see an ad about a cute puppy or an eagle landing on someone, get in a good mood, and then you'll be served an actual ad itself. Because we're telling the algorithm we want people to purchase, and they've now engineered your behavior that if they serve that really pretty, fun, emotional, striking ad, that you're going to convert. And that's why creative now is so important. What I'm not saying is that platforms are actually trying to run psyops on you. I can't prove that per se, but what I am saying is that creative is getting much more important. And kind of the different sources would say that now creative is going to be 60 to 90% of what's going to trigger a purchase and get people to actually convert on your campaigns. And at 60 or 90%, you're going to understand why we need to put more of a focus on that. So the biggest flaw, as I mentioned, that I see with a lot of brands today is, again, not putting enough effort into their creative. So when we meet with a lot of different brands and we're running an audit of what they're running through, more often than not, their previous agencies or their internal teams are looking at what I see as kind of more high-level vanity-based metrics. And not to say that's a negative thing, but just understanding what's a top performer, even if it's by funnel, that could be helpful. But what you really want to get is into the granular understanding of why this creative worked. Another major flaw I see with brands today is that they're not putting enough effort into looking and reviewing and researching the creative that's working or not working. So more often than not, what's happened when we bring into different brands is that they can give an understanding of what's working from, let's say, the top of the funnel or bottom of the funnel, but they don't understand what component of that creative is working and why it's working. This is kind of exactly why we've invested so much in different creative research and analytics tools that a lot of individuals or brands I've seen use are tools like VidMob or Motion, which are all really, really strong. And what it can really do is help you understand kind of the strength of the campaign or the creative, the pacing, what works from a visual framing perspective, what type of messaging architecture works, and different narrative arcs that could work through you. And they actually have technology within those softwares that have AI that could give you an understanding based off of different actual human behaviors. So all in all, it's really more of a roadmap and more of a direction that is much more sophisticated than what a lot of brands that we work with or start to work with were using previously. And really, this kind of data is an enormous unlock to what is going to be the most impactful driver of your performance, which that is creative. So even if your creative is dialed, none of it matters if you're not measuring the right thing. And that brings us to fatal flaw number 3, which is most brands measuring the wrong things. So the last major flaw is arguably one of the most damaging to a lot of brands I see today, and that's how brands measure their media performance. So the truth is, media measurement is extremely difficult, extremely complex, and can be extremely expensive, right? So for a lot of brands, that's an enormous hurdle. And for many of them, that means they don't really do anything about it. And what they focus on are platform-based metrics. And the unfortunate part when you're doing that is it doesn't really give you an indication of if your business is successful. It's just if the platform's successful, which could have a huge impacts in driving your overarching scale. When you focus on this, the illusion of performance can begin, right? So your campaigns, again, can look really, really efficient in platform, but when you look at your back-end numbers, you can see kind of a big delta in terms of overarching performance. And it creates what you would see as a dangerous feedback loop where teams could scale based on the wrong signals, algorithms start optimizing towards the wrong outcomes, and your business will drift further and further away in terms of driving the success and goal that you're after. And again, at the end of the day, algorithms can only learn what you teach them. And if we feed them basically just vanity metrics, they will happily optimize towards that metric, but again, you're not going to see that impact on the back end for your campaigns. So the moment we start connecting the right information, we have the right data such as CRM systems, putting in back end revenue, contribution margin, customer lifetime value, all really important and impactful metrics that could really bring the system to understand your business and help you to drive your overarching performance and overall goals for your campaigns. So the challenge is that not every brand has the sophistication or the budget to run sophisticated attribution, right? It can be very complex, it can be very costly, and on the other end, you may not have enough data to actually run what you could see as incrementality tests. But that shouldn't stop you or make you kind of not run measurement to understand how this impacts your overall business. A few cost-efficient ways you could do that is one, you could use MER, which is different terms for typically your media efficiency ratio, which is your North Star, where you're looking at understanding how the overarching paid performance looks at the overall site or your overall back end to understand that where you're delivering or driving cost and what it's doing to your overarching revenue. You could also run simple incrementality tests if you have enough data and create basically different types of systems and different setups to get an understanding of whether or not a platform works, a creative works, or even a specific product within your creative. You could also then add in channel trend analysis and pair that with your consistent back-end financial reporting, and it should give you an oversight of your overarching business review and outcome. So again, perfect attribution is really hard to get. And frankly, even if you have all the money and all the data in the world, it's not going to be perfect. So what we're trying to focus on with these more cost-efficient trends is just that, to get a trend and understanding of your campaign so that you're not only focused on metrics via Meta or Google, but understanding how those metrics could kind of peel back the onion and understand how it impacts the overarching performance of the campaign or of your business. When it comes to MER, and again, what that means is a marketing efficiency ratio. MER is essentially kind of your North Star to get an understanding of how healthy your business is doing and whether or not you're making the right margins in terms of how much you're spending on your paid media. So the way in which you'd calculate it is you'd take your overall site revenue and put that over your paid media cost. Unfortunately, just MER, you're not going to be able to contribute all the factors, right? There's SMS, there's potential promos, there's email and so forth. But what you're really trying to get is a directional trend. And with trends, you want more and more data. So when it comes to an MER, if you could take that number and look at it over a year, whether daily or weekly, you could quickly see how well it correlates the performance across the platforms that you're running. And it also gives you kind of an understanding of whether or not awareness-based campaigns are actually working. Because put it this way, if you ran an awareness-based campaign, in platform, it's not going to look very strong and you're going to turn it off, right? But if you ran the campaign, turned it off, and all of a sudden your overarching sales went down, then you have a big issue, right? So what MER would showcase is that if you ran this awareness campaign in platform, it doesn't look strong, but in the back end, we're seeing some of the strongest revenue numbers in past months. It's giving you an indication and a directional trend of what you should be doing. And again, why I'm going through a lot of this is that a lot of agencies will kind of take advantage of their clients. They'll come into a meeting and have these big smiles of how they crushed it for that month, and you're sitting there saying you didn't do that well, right? That's a frustration. And they're showcasing to you that they hit this ridiculous CPA on Meta, but again, no one cares if that didn't actually impact your bottom line. So again, not to say that looking at platform metrics is a bad thing. You need to do it, but you also need to look at other metrics that have business outcomes and impact your overall business, or you're in a path to not scale. So once you fix these three things, I promise you'll be better suited than 99% of the brands that come across my desk. So I'll be posting more videos like this. If you enjoyed it, please post a comment, share, ask any questions. I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as possible.